Get up and get out. Get out. Get out.
I have a question for you.
Say Christ is Lord. Say Christ is Lord. Say it. You say Christ is Lord. Get out. Get out. Christ is Lord.
Hello and welcome in to another episode of Offensively Accurate, hosted by yours truly, Atlas Thugged, aka White Boy D-Voice, aka another racially ambiguous groiper. And appreciate everybody for being in here already. Yeah, definitely make sure you smash the like button. We have a lot to get into, as always. And today actually might be a little bit boring for some people because there's so much to get into, and it's going to be a bit of the nitty-gritty. I guess I'll get that out of the way. But what we're dealing with today is obviously more of the reaction to the fallout from Venezuela. We have now all of the inklings of what is looking to be more military involvement in Iran, which is not a good thing. We have Trump and Lindsey Graham seemingly being butt buddies all over the internet. We'll look at some of those photos and some of the messaging behind that. That's one that MAGA's very disappointed in, because Lindsey Graham is a definite enemy of MAGA. Even the most bereft of intelligence of those in MAGA can understand Lindsey Graham is not a good person. We also have JD Vance's home was targeted, which was a bit odd, and of course it was by a transgender individual, and so that's a lovely story. It's something smaller though. Tim Walz is stepping out of the governor race, which I think is an indication that the fraud in Minneapolis, or Minnesota at large, is very, very real, if you will. And I think that shows a sign of fear that Governor Walz is about to probably be getting looked at, and not in a good way. And I think there was a post that I had seen, just a little one. Now, I didn't dig into it at all, but it had basically read, the report was that Amy Klobuchar was potentially eyeing this kind of weird change of guard with Tim Walz, where if he steps down and she becomes the governor, she can appoint him to a position, something along those lines, but who really cares? The bigger kind of news that's in the social side of things, that's outside of the Venezuela and the kind of overall, like, what's the news cycle, is that Vivek was bullied off of X. No joke. This was posted about maybe an hour or 2 hours ago, that Vivek had posted in an article. I forget where the article was published, but now it's only going to be Vivek's team who is posting for him. And he says that the internet isn't real, essentially, and that it's all botted. And who does he point to, of all people? Nick Fuentes. And he says that it's this inorganic, the way that he ratios people, and he gets all these likes. And so Vivek will no longer be posting on X and Instagram, I would imagine, for the foreseeable future. Amazing. We love that. I also watched the Beardson and Dumanat debate, which I think was actually probably a pretty good one for most people to watch, because that's two dissident right figures, one of them being a groiper general. Dumanat, I think, is just maybe more a bit in the more nebulous space. I don't know if he's a groiper, he considers himself that, but regardless, two dissident white individuals, right individuals, going back and forth. And so basically what you had was Beardson was in the pro camp. Beardson was in the pro-Venezuela camp. Dumanat was not. And so I thought that was a good debate to see through, although it only really remained on that topic for the first hour before it went back into more Nick Fuentes kind of debating, like the infiltration to the institutions. And so there's a lot here. And so we're always going to cover the reaction from the fallout of the Venezuelan extraction of Maduro, although there's some weirdness that's surrounding the entire thing. You have Maduro posing thumbs up in all these photos. He's changed clothes like 10 times. I saw somewhere, I think the tweet was satire, but I saw somewhere that he was like mouthing Epstein files so that anytime the camera was pointed at him, which is just funny. And I think it's crazy because this is a guy who is aura farming while he's being arrested for supposedly like this great, awful, state-sanctioned crime against our nation. And it's just hilarious overall. But also, in addition to that, what you have is these kind of typical MAGA vultures, these MAGA kind of the circular crowd, the grifter class, if you will. And it was really disappointing. And so even beyond them, like Terrible and some of these other ones that are these prominent accounts on X and otherwhere, you have people like Nick Shirley and Alex Jones and Benny Johnson and Wall Street Apes, and it could go on, there's a few more in there, that continually are posting either AI generated videos of Venezuelans celebrating, or are posting videos of Venezuelans, but from like a year and a half ago, or from like Miami. And it's weird because even though they're being community noted, they're not deleting the posts. And so a lot of people have been posting about this, namely Luke Rutkowski. And so that is a lot, but we're going to be getting into it. And at the top, I should also let this be known, this is Marjorie Taylor Greene's last day in Congress. And I think for one, that's a good thing. One less woman in Congress, that's what we need. But also, obviously like halfway satirical mark. But what I would say is a good thing is on her way out, forgive me, she has pushed forward legislation to completely dismantle the H-1B program. And so hopefully we'll see what happens with that. Probably nothing, since she won't be here after the fact, since she just dropped it off. But also probably the thing that blew me away the most, that I'll only cover a little bit here because I'm probably going to make a video about it, is what we're finding out amidst everything going on in terms of immigration actually, is that America is actively giving out O-1B visas to OnlyFans talent, if you will. And this was like an insane story amidst everything else going on with the immigration. But when you read into it, the reports basically read that they make their cases to the immigration lawyers by showing them the likes on their posts and their follower accounts, and that they're performers. And if you thought it couldn't somehow get worse, it somehow is. And not even that it's getting worse. You know, these things have been happening. It's more so like, did I need to know about it? And it is unfortunate. And hopefully that gets knocked away really quickly, because I think out of any immigration, we don't need any more whores in America. Like we have, trust me, take it from me, we have plenty of them. We don't need any more whores. We don't. If we could import some virgins, that would be nice. That'd be one thing. But also at the top too, I want to start with this actually, because it seemed like a good bit of people were kind of disappointed in my last take on the last stream, although it was kind of not like an emergency stream, but it was a last minute stream. And so I wanted to respond to one of the comments. We'll start with that actually. That'll give us a segue into the Venezuelan kind of story here. And so what I would like to do is, it's one of these comments on my last stream, so I'm just going to pull that up real quick. Hopefully it won't blow this out with audio real quick. So I just need to go to the comment section. I'm going to put this up on screen for you. So here we are. It's one thing down here. It's right here. And I actually appreciate whoever this is, Dr. Pooks, if he's in chat, I actually appreciate the fact that you were like at least being, genuinely honest, and I always love 1989 theology comments. But this is what they said. Dr. Pooks said he's disappointed in both Nick Fuentes' and my wavering takes on what is America first, with respect to the notion that unprovoked regime change wars that no one asked for can be American first if it's spun as having some nominal benefit to America's interest, such as Nick originally flexing and tweeting the flag until he later heard the ongoing occupation terms, or Atlas stating this stream that U.S. imperialism can still be considered America first if kidnapping leaders lowers the cost of gas in Ohio. Disappointing to say the least. No one seems to have any consistency. These takes that the U.S. GAE aggression can be spun as America first if the U.S. has expected some nominal future domestic benefit is way too close to the usual neocon cope for Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, etc. So he goes on to say, because some people were actually with him and some people were against him. But he goes down here as well, and he says, I agree that Atlas was at least forthright about his personal opinions, and that he's not 100% for the Venezuela strike. Nor was he doing performative outrage about another no new wars broken Trump promise, but it's very telling when one admits that they don't care about the military-industrial complex does abroad as long as it is alleged to benefit Americans back home. And so there's a couple of things in here. I think the first thing I would respond to would be this opening one here. The wavering takes on what is America first. And so I felt like I had done at least a decent enough job explaining what I thought America first was in the hypothetical. And that would probably be the first thing I would say was like, just because I am engaging with something and thinking about it on both ways does not mean I'm fully endorsing it. But my thoughts were overtly over the top, was we need to wait and see more. We need to wait and see how this develops. Where is this going to develop? What's going to happen? And I think we already got our answer like immediately after, in the aftermath, with the way that it is developing and the occupation. And I think in tandem with the story with Iran, that's a bit more telling to where we currently are. And it is nice to see Tomfo in here. we're having a meeting later on today. What I don't get actually is this whole thing about nominal benefit, cost of gas in Ohio. I guess this would be maybe this is a bit more too nuanced, and that would be the one thing I would say too is like the nuance of this entire issue is apparently dead in the water, and that's how a lot of people can only really see these things. And I'm not blaming or accusing anybody, but I think it's very clear that a lot of people can only interact with things in a dichotomy or a dialectic. And it's not just any accusation here, but to make the point that these large geopolitical, when you're dealing with the actual reality of what the government is doing, and you rope in the rest of the world with that too, to act as if there's simple solutions or there's not nuance to some of these arguments or the way that things are done, I think that's a poor way to look at it. And if anything, I would say over and over again, to look at these things in the most pragmatic sense as well. Like, what are we going to do? Like, does someone have a time machine I can go walk through to go like prevent this from happening? It's like, that's not happening. So like, we have to move forward with what we have, with what's on the table right now. But this is what I also don't get is the disappointing to say the least. No one seems to have any consistency. Now, the thing is like, I have been generally anti-interventionist, and I will say that, yes, I largely am anti-interventionist, especially in the terms of all of the wars are simply being done for these foreign exchanges for the benefit of Israel, right? That's largely the lens that we've looked at almost all of the last kind of 15, 20, 30 years or so, and maybe a bit more than that, of America's foreign conflicts and the military interventions there, so forth. I will appreciate him being honest here, but to go back here, let me bring up Nick Fuentes, and I'm glad that this came from First Class Clips. This has been a position that that Nick has held for a long time. And so this is from Fuentes Updates, but I also saw it from First Class Clips. This is him back in 2019. For a lot of people who are saying like he's flip-flopped and such, no, he's always had this position. And I think he even makes a clearer position here back in 2019. And so I'll play this clip here for everybody to know that like this is where Nick was at in 2019.
I think that an intervention in Venezuela is well within our interest. And it's as simple as the Monroe Doctrine. The Western Hemisphere belongs to America. America is an empire. America has to act like an empire sometimes. To an extent, this hemisphere is important to us. America's strength comes from, to a large extent, the global economy, to the local economy. And so what happens in a lot of these countries affects us. Now, does that warrant America invading Venezuela and occupying Venezuela? Of course not. But there are different kinds of interventions. That's another little snag that people get confused. And so when we look at Venezuela, my take is, I'm generally non-interventionist, but I see here is a place where a little bit of American intervention can produce a good thing for American interest. We're not in favor of a ground war, anything excessive. All our allies, all our client states, basically, in the Western Hemisphere moved to condemn Maduro, and they endorsed the opposition candidate. And maybe this is what it takes to tip it in favor of the opposition, or maybe, there's some kind of military action also. Maybe there's airstrikes or whatever. If that could yield a government which is pro-Western, which is in favor of America, and then there, outside of Cuba and Bolivia, is no base of operations for our enemies in the Western Hemisphere, that's ultimately a good thing.
So, to be fair, there's like not even a slight bit of that I would disagree with. And again, coming from the pragmatic sense of, obviously, I do think the American empire is what it has done in terms of the American state, and I would have to separate those from the American people. I would say that, yes, that largely if you were to quantify the morality of what the American empire has done for the last, 50, 60 years, you would say, yes, it's morally reprehensible, the involvement, and I agree with this comment here. The Monroe Doctrine doesn't extend to the Eastern Hemisphere, completely agree. But what it does extend to is it does extend to South America and the things that are in our hemisphere. So I do think there's a completely different objective and strategic data set and framing you have to deal with versus a intervention that's happening in Venezuela versus an intervention that's happening in the Middle East. Now, the only unfortunate thing is that, like I said last time, and this is funny because I heard this from Beardson and Dumernet's debate like in the very beginning, and this is one of the easiest things I could think of, was we know that we are a Zionist-occupied government. Like, this is something that we know that they run rampant through here. So knowing that, and knowing that how long it's been going on, well, it would stand to reason that we are uniquely tied, and unfortunately so, with Israel, meaning that now you will be seeing things that will both benefit Israelis and the American people. And so I think to use the metric of like, if it benefits Israel, regardless of what it benefits Americans, you have to disregard it, or that's the metric you use to kind of to put something down or say we shouldn't pursue it. I think the better question would be, what's the relativity there? And I saw this from Sam Parker as well. The relativity would be, does it benefit Israelis a lot more than Americans? Is it about the same? Or does it benefit Americans a lot more? Now, obviously, again, this is why I say like the nuance is dead aspect, because there's so many different elements of the geopolitical situation at large. And what I will say is I am gonna play a few arguments from people like Ryan Dawson and Dave Reilly, who do believe this was largely and only a move to help benefit Israel. And so I'm not sitting here and saying I'm closed-minded and not open to things. I think the lead-in I had was we need to wait and see more. However, my operating principle is what does benefit the American people. And to maybe give an extension of the argument, now I do think it was a bit disingenuous to say some nominal, when the comment said some nominal benefit in gas in Ohio. Obviously, this wouldn't just benefit gas in Ohio, this would benefit gas prices around all the United States. But before I get into the but, nationally, if gas prices go down, that has a trickle-down effect, as it always has. When gas prices go down, the cost of bread goes down, the cost of transportation goes down, the cost of moving supplies goes down, a lot of things go down. It actually benefits a lot of industries. And so it would not just be a decrease in just general gas costs, but again, the but would be, the but would be is that there is now actually there's conflicting reports. There's an argument happening about that element, though, the profitability. And so what I've seen so far, and which we'll get into, is that the oil that Venezuela possesses is a bunch of heavy crude oil, like it's not refined. So when you see it, it looks like dog poop. It doesn't look like oil that you see like in these videos where it's like bubbling up out of the sand and whatnot. And because of that, the way that I think I saw from Chris Martenson, he had posited that it would ultimately just either break even or be less profitable than like trade negotiations elsewhere. And that the heavy overhead upfront cost of doing the refining ultimately would make it not profitable. Then there's arguments on the other side saying no, that actually because like America is one of the only few places that can refine it, they already have all the processes set up, that it's not as novel as people are making it out to be. And again, I'm not anything close to like an oil or a refinery expert at all. So I'm just going and looking between the arguments that people are putting forward. And so just to say, that is the argument here. Heavy sour crude oil sounds like a weed strain. Yeah, it does. Yeah. Forgive me. I feel like I'm getting sick. So getting into the Iran war. So we're going to get into the Venezuela fallout first, but I want to posit where we are right now and where today is. And I think that it's heavily focused on Iran, and unfortunately so. Three elements here. One, that's the kind of the most obvious and overt to everybody that's kind of got the visuals here, is seeing that Lindsey Graham is being buddy-buddy with Donald Trump. And so we'll go to that here. So he's pictured with Trump, make Iran great again. This is the photo that I used for the thumbnail, and this is what's been going around, although I think I saw more viral posts from other people, but from DMT. And what's even more insane is this actual video that I saw. I think I saw it from Kim.com, I believe. So it's Kim.com, and just notice here real quick. So this man right here on the left here, this is Howard Lutnick. And again, if you're not familiar, Howard Lutnick was a next door neighbor with Jeffrey Epstein, has very weird ties, and is in the cabinet for Donald Trump. Well, I don't know if it's considered a cabinet position, but he's in the administration. Then this is Senator Lindsey Graham. This is the guy who's like, what do they call him? What's his meme name? His meme Wojak is called like Holden Blood Feast, right? It's the guy who's the old dude in the wheelchair, and he was like, I will literally do anything to see Arabs and brown people die in the Middle East. That's kind of the meme that you get from him. And so what you see here is disturbing, to say the least. And so these three guys, just a short interaction, but just pay attention to how giddy Lindsey Graham is. There's just short exchange here.
One of the things that is happening, and I think you see it all the time, Howard, you've seen it, that Cuba is ready to fall. You know? Yes. Cuba looks like it's ready to fall. I don't know if they're going to hold out. But Cuba now has no income. They got all of their income from Venezuela, from the Venezuelan oil. They're not getting any of it. And Cuba literally is ready to fall. And you have a lot of great Cuban Americans that are going to be very happy about this.
So just to show you, like, it's less about what Trump is saying. He's talking about Cuba, right, and the potential to target Cuba. But look at this, right? Like, oh my gosh, dude. Lindsey Graham, damn. He's like, yeah, that's what I wanted the whole time. He's over here. He's like, man, he's coughing a little bit. He's just excited. He's giddy. It's almost like he knows what's coming. And so, yeah, Lutnick is the Commerce Secretary and the one behind the Golden Visa. Yes. Lutnick has extreme, like, heavy questions surrounding him. And I will say, like, I've also made notice of that too. Who put that? Miles Civis? Where's he at in here? I can't click on it now, unfortunately. My scroll bar disappeared on this stupid chat thing. But the amount of times he's been in these photo ops, and I believe it was even one of the days where he was signing all of the executive orders. It's like the only person that's even standing next to him is like Howard Lutnick. And he's like, he's smiling real big. It is very, very questionable to say the least. Now, this obviously just inquires just on its ethos, the appearance of Lindsey Graham being giddy with Donald Trump again. Most people don't get a good feeling of, and the reason why is because Lindsey Graham is a disgusting human being, and he should not be in Congress at all. He should have been ousted a long time ago. And he is one of the most war hawkish individuals that we've probably seen. I don't know if there's anybody else you could even put in there. Obviously, John Bolton is one, but I think Lindsey Graham takes the cake for, currently, in power and is around. But this is something that I even saw from like one of these basic MAGA accounts. I was like not Lady MAGA or Lady Liberty or something like that. But I saw it from like this, regular girl MAGA account. And she just listed like all of these things from Lindsey Graham. It's like, said this about Trump, said this about Trump, did this, said this about Trump, took this much money, had this much in fraud, like, etc. And I mean, what do people think of this? I mean, like, and then I was tempted to go to a couple people who I know are like very Trump, crony individuals, like extremely pro-Trump. And I was tempted to listen in. And I'm not even joking you, I lasted 15 seconds. So I clicked about halfway through, about the 40-minute mark. I clicked in and no joke, I hit play. First thing I hear is, no, I don't think Trump is bought and paid for by Israel. Clicked off. So just to show you that they are in a mountain of playing off, like, what is this 8D90 chess? In addition to that too, like I had said, prior to this actually happening, or us getting the report of it, was once the strike will happen, Trump's approval rating will get a bump, which it did. And Trump's approval rating, I think, bounced back up to 42%. I think 42%, I'm pretty sure, which was down around like the low, like mid 30s or so, which he does get like the bump, the presidential bump, the I'm an American bump, and we're going to bomb you bump. And I think this has resulted in more of this kind of infighting. And so one interaction I would highlight too, before we move on to Ryan Dawson and Dave Reilly, pushing that it's the Israel angle, is Jake Shields and Nick Fuentes got into it online. And this is kind of the apology tweet. I don't have the one saved from when he was kind of going at Nick. But Jake Shields had even said, they strongly disagree over Venezuela. So that caused them to throw a few insults at each other. Said he walked away today and realized how stupid it was to fight when they're on the same side. And he said, we need to do our best to stop the constant infighting. And Nick responded, he says, glad we were to squash the beef. Sometimes we have to crash out a little bit. As long as we can come back together as a team. Disagreements happen, they shouldn't tear apart the movement. Let's do another pod soon. So that's solid. And sometimes we have to crash out a little bit. I agree with that too. But overall, like, I think this kind of goes back to like one of the main things I've always said for a hot minute is like, there's obviously this feeling, and I think you can see it mostly in Gen Z, the generation that doesn't really have much to live for, that feels like the most kind of on edge, fractious, anxious, angst. And what I think you can notice from them, and I think I've said this multiple times before, is that there's a lot of instances where you can tell people are like very close to having a psychotic breakdown. And I think a lot of people can just tell us in their daily life. I mean, like, and this is unfortunate. I won't name any names, but I was around somebody the other day and they like had dropped a cup of coffee, and you would have thought like somebody shot their mother. And it was weird because I was I've known this person for a hot minute and I wasn't used to seeing that level of reaction from them, but I'm seeing it a lot more often. And you could see it obviously outplaying itself in the political space too. I would say part of it's natural. People get passionate about this stuff. And especially when you begin to, you see something that makes you think that someone else is like a an enemy or a spy, you get paranoid. But that's also going to be like a little bit of our downfall is any ounce of like disagreement or the slightest bit of like, I don't agree with you 100% or like, I agree with you 80% of the way is immediately kind of shuffled into the box of, well, here's documentation that they're a Fed. And I think at a certain point it does. Well, I think what Jake Shields called him a neocon, I believe, not a Fed. I think at a certain point we do need to take a little bit of a step back and give a bit of breathing room for disagreement without immediately scratching somebody off and saying like you're done, you're no good, because it just tears down the movement and at least the glue that should be holding it together at least a little bit. But to move away from that though, what I would like to, yeah, I knew that was coming from Seb. Moving away from that though, was the Ryan Dawson and Dave Reilly. So this was Ryan Dawson's message, and this kind of took me not by surprise in the slightest bit, but Zeb feels attacked. That's funny. Listen, if the shoe fits. That's funny. Ryan Dawson says, we all know Iran could close the Strait of Hormuz if they are attacked. It would cripple the flow of oil from several Middle Eastern states. You have to procure massive oil reserves from a place like Venezuela before you can move on Iran. Delcy Rodriguez, the vice president, now president of Venezuela, called the coup a Zionist attack. Now, why would she say that? What did this come right after Trump met Bibi in Florida? Put it together, people. It's a 6-pointed star. Now, here's what's insane about this is I actually, before I saw Ryan Dawson's tweet about it, I had seen that Dave Reilly had put this forward in a space with, I believe, Meta Prime. And it makes a lot of sense, actually. If that was like the big bargaining chip on the table for Iran, is that they can close the Strait of Hormuz to economically harm and place tensions and pressures there, then it would make sense that the number one thing that you would want to avoid would be that getting shut, or what you could do instead is have a proxy or a replacement, a substitute. Venezuela being that substitute, you procure the resources from Venezuela, now you have free reign to do what you want to Iran, because now their big bargaining chip means nothing, because it's not going to harm you as much. That does make a lot of sense, and no joke, well, a lot of the reports that I've been getting recently in this Iran stuff, it says verbatim that Israel is checking if taking out Venezuela is giving them enough clearance to go after Israel. And I think that, or Iran, forgive me, I wish it was Israel. And I think that tracks. That tracks a lot. And so that's obviously the message form. I'll go ahead and let Dave Reilly on the spaces go ahead and say his, because I saw his first. So I'm going to make sure I play his as well, too. I like Dave Reilly. But here it is. I think he follows me, too. And so again, he says, is this the real reason why we took out Maduro? So that if the U.S. and Israel launch another campaign against Iran, closing the Strait of Hormuz would no longer cripple the Western oil market. And I would say, in addition to that, if this is the case, then that does answer the question of Sam Parker of who does this benefit more, Americans or Israel? And I think if that is the reasoning here was to allow Israel-American joint operations to take place against Iran, then it's clear. I think it's very obvious who's benefiting more from what we did to Venezuela, especially seeing how the fact that, we haven't seen anything beyond a small percent decrease in gas prices across the nation, just in speculation, not in actuality. But here's what he said in the space.
So there's the play. That's what they're going to hit. They're going to hit Cuba. They're going to hit Iran. And I guess my big thing, or at least the way that I'm rationalizing what's going on in Venezuela is, if the U.S. and Israel were to launch a second or a more serious campaign of strikes against Iran, I mean, at least what I was thinking was going to happen even the first go around is that Iran would grow a fucking pair of balls and close the Straits of Hormuz and choke the West by withholding oil. I kind of figured that was kind of like a no-brainer. They didn't do that when we bombed them. But now, of course, since we've essentially, from what I understand, taken control of Venezuela, and that means that we'll have access to all of the oil there, that kind of takes a card out of Iran's hand. Now if they close the Straits of Hormuz, it doesn't really matter nearly as much as it did, when they had Maduro in, right? Because Maduro was clearly aligned, with Iran, with Russia, with China, against America and Israel.
And we obviously know that Venezuela probably being, I think just de facto being like the one very strong presence of a anti-Zionist regime in Southern America. And this is also kind of curious because I think you also need to forgive me, that was an awful slip. You also need to rope in Argentina. And especially because Argentina also being another nation in South America, I think those cannot be understated given the fact of what we have done in terms of like our electioneering in Argentina, our financial benefits to Argentina. Then you see what Milei has done. And I didn't even know this until I listened to a little bit of Durham explaining it. But Milei won the Genesis Prize, I believe earlier, middle of last year. And what he did with the prize money from the Genesis Prize was he used it to launch an NGO called American Friends of the Isaac Accords, which is an initiative to make promises to strengthen Israeli infrastructure and strengthen Zionist ties in Argentina. Now, if you look directly at Paul Singer, and that's going to be a whole other element here, Paul Singer he is a through line that does connect both Argentina and Venezuela, as in he is somebody who has benefited off of the defaulting of the loans between both of those nations, something that both Scott Bessent and George Soros have in common, along with the other billionaire investor there. So we'll get into that. Before I go from this, though, I want to go to Sam Parker's take while we're in this realm of the, what was the reason, right? That funny meme. I think it was Cardi B, right? What was the reason? I used to have the audio like saved on my phone. So this is a pretty long one from Sam Parker, and so I'll save some of this because I've already read through a little bit. But here's the main question. He says, "Was the Venezuelan action good for America?" Well, in my opinion, that's the wrong question. The right question is, was it better for our greatest ally or for us on a relative basis? So then he lays out the timeline, and he explains his answer to the question. And so he lays out how BlackRock was also buying these distressed bonds. Enter in Paul Singer and his Elliott Management buying these bonds at a discount, which is considered like vulture capitalism, essentially. Buying these bonds at a discount, which are then trading at 50 to 70 cents on a dollar. And so they're essentially making money off of the fact that these bonds are defaulting. And so he explains Venezuela kind of to bringing in Bitcoin, doing gold to Bitcoin swaps, trying to do what it can to help salvage some of its economy here, and a bit more in here as well. And it's a great thread. I would encourage people to just go and find this on their own. But going to his summary, he says for noticers, so Goldman Sachs, BlackRock, Paul Singer, Robert Pincus, need I go on? With the help of Zion Don and the hijacked U.S. military, Israel First Jewish billionaires will get the long-awaited payout on their distressed investment gamble and seize control of Venezuela's oil. While the United States government will take the strategic Bitcoin reserve, it's unclear so far the ultimate fate of that Bitcoin. But I'm sure the crypto bros who bankrolled Trump's 2024 campaign will be very happy. And I'm sure plenty will find its way to BlackRock, helping it strengthen its grip over the financial system. The Silicon Valley tech bros will also now get to plunder other Venezuelan mineral resources to build and power their tech at a discount and increase the relative power over us little guys too. He goes on to say with full access to and control over Venezuela oil, Israel and the zogged out U.S. government are poised to make another run at Iran while simultaneously grabbing OPEC by the balls and further stressing China's access to oil. And he continues to go down here. The main benefits of this intervention look to accrue to Jewish and Zionist billionaires, financiers, tech oligarchs, Israel, and other Zionist-aligned people and entities. Does strengthening and enriching those powers help America First Americans? Is giving Silicon Valley even more relative power good or bad for America First sovereignty? Is making BlackRock more powerful good for us? And again, great thread. I would encourage you to run through that. And what I would say is this too. I think that we find ourselves once again asking this question of like, does this top-down capitalism play out the way that the capitalists would have you believe? And I have a few different pieces of mind on that, but I do think overwhelmingly so that when you look at just like the recent example I brought up of the Uber, it was either Uber Eats or DoorDash or whatever it was, they basically, to make their business profitable, they made their standard version worse and their premium version just decent. And so it's just to say at a large scale, I think there are overwhelmingly a lot of companies that are showing that despite how much money they get or how many tax breaks they get, benefits, etc., that money does not, more often than not, does not find its way down to the American employee. And I think even more so, this is overstated by the statistic that was brought up by Jimmy Dore. When Jimmy Dore had said it was I believe back in the 1980s, it was like 1982, that for every dollar that the employee made, the CEO made 40, or something to that effect. It was like 32 or 40. And then bringing that to today, I think it was from 2023 actually, or 2024. For every dollar the employee makes, the CEO or employer makes about 300 and like 330 or something like that. So it's clearly an exponential difference that the CEO is making a large percentage more than what the employee is. And I think for most people who understand the base level economics know that the wages have been stagnant, which is why the conversation about minimum wage has been a bit of a thorn in the side, because while ultimately in a vacuum, the idea of raising a minimum wage ultimately isn't helpful, but the problem that we're up against is the fact that wages are stagnant. So there's a lot more nuance to be had in there too. But I do find this to be another question that you grasp with, which is, again, even if on paper the benefit is supposed to go to ExxonMobil and these oil companies, will that mean that Americans will see a sizable or even a decent enough benefit to offset all of the possible negative externalities and negative consequences? Because when you think about it just from what Christy Noman said, I believe yesterday on Fox News, are we seriously expected to take in hundreds of thousands of more Venezuelan refugees from the problem that we literally just caused? And here's the worst part too, is like, at least when you're bombing Afghanistan and they can't just like cross the river and like come upstream or cross the ocean and be here, but they can in Venezuela, and it'd be a lot easier for these people to just find their way there. So I'm a bit of a few different minds on that. And obviously the White House, they came out and said that that's not what she said, but she got community noted. And I saw a good bit from Devon Stack. I mean, like, she literally says verbatim, apply for refugee status. It's like, everybody saw it. Like, who are you running from? So with that being said, on top of the fact that if this does turn into, again, a 20-year, 30-year nation-building process where it's this, where all it does is become a grinding military-industrial complex machine for Americans to go and die, then yeah, like, I'm against that. And of course I would be against that. And so that's the only part that I think maybe felt a little bit disingenuous to one of those comments, which was like, I would never just all of a sudden be like for nation building, especially while we're not getting any benefits here in America. And I think I'd even said that on stream too, which is like, I care much less about the promise of Trump saying no new wars. What I do care a lot about though, is the perception cannot be continually maintained that literally everyone else but Americans are benefiting from all the actions the U.S. government makes. And I think that's the more important perception. And I think people see that. And luckily, hopefully I didn't get my hopes up, but supposedly 2,000 federal agents are on their way to Minneapolis. We'll see what happens with that. I hope my hopes don't get up too much. I'm gonna pull back a little bit and wait and see. But that's kind of the point. It's like, look at this big operation that was pulled off, all of the focus, all the attention to detail. Now we're on to Iran. Now we're potentially looking at Cuba and Mexico. And I, in the words of Owen Schroeder, like, when is it us? Like, when is it our turn? Like, when, at what point will like the American people like get to celebrate in the streets for something our government did? It's like, why are Venezuelans celebrating in the streets before we are? Again, another point, because according to the Russia Times and RT, and again, understand that state media, but let me back up. All of our guys supposedly are posting videos of a bunch of supposed Venezuelans celebrating. I said this at the top of the hour, and it's not true. It's a bunch of AI generated bullshit, in addition to a bunch of protests and other celebrations from completely different times. And I think one of them was even so bad it was like a celebration in Argentina from like some World Cup or something. It's like it had nothing to do with Venezuela at all, with the recent events, if you will. And so on the other side of that, I saw this video from RT, Russia Times. I think that's what it is, RT. And they have the complete opposite. And not even just the complete opposite, that people aren't celebrating, and that people are actually in the streets holding up photos and portraits of Maduro, chanting for him to be returned. Well, you have even another layer to that, is that who's leading it is the opposition party, who's supposedly supposed to be mad that he's like rigging the elections. So how does that make sense? How do you square that away? And additionally, beyond that, like, why is Alex Jones and all these other accounts not deleting these videos? That's shameful. That's horrendous. That's low tier, low hanging fruit bullshit that we would clap Harry Sisson for. Like, what are you talking about? And so I saw a really sad post specifically with Alex Jones, and like it just made me sad. And it's in line with I think where a lot of people are, and where I've been with Alex is that I do think that he ultimately, the reason why you're seeing someone not go to bat against Trump is because I do think like he literally has, again, figuratively, a loaded gun against him and his family all over the Sandy Hook, and they have leverage on him. And I feel awful because the tweet that I saw, the guy said, nobody can ever make me hate Alex Jones. And I feel like whatever he's doing now is to try to secure a future for his children. And like, he knows that. And that's kind of like a really sad outlook, which is like, everybody kind of feels it, that he's unwilling to go to the next step. And most people have always kind of surmised and theorized that the reason why is because essentially it was all of the Trump team that bailed him out and saved him from going to prison or paying $1 trillion or whatever it was, doubled the GDP of France for some bullshit. Forgive me, I shouldn't be cursing like this. I apologize, and Lord forgive me. But you just see the soulless kind of gaze from him, and then now you see he's posting these fake videos and fake AI stuff and like not deleting him, and it's like, it's so bad. It's gotten so bad. Alex Jones has fallen so far. What I will say though is this, like, I will still appreciate him for being the platform that he is. However, I do think they're in for a rocky roads ahead. That's for sure. But Zeb here says Polymarket players, Tim Pool, Nick Shirley, even more wearing hoodies. They're paid to put a slop, even AI slop. That was what was insane. I don't know if I have that video or not, or the photo, but the next day, Nick Shirley's posting with like more stuff about the Somalian fraud. But what's he wearing? Just like Zeb writes here, he's wearing a Polymarket hoodie. It says Polymarket right across of it. And then I saw the post, can't remember from who, but it's like, this newly on the scene, now gone mega viral Mormon Christian is now promoting a gambling site. Like, and again, it's like, what is this, right? Like, where are the morals? Where are the values? And again, socially, obviously it's not where it needs to be. And I think that's where some of the most common sense stuff is. Socially, I think is where a lot of the nuance, you don't even need nuance. I think socially is where a lot of things are obvious to people and anybody with eyes. Good. Oh, there we go. Tom was watching Zeb. Nice. I had it on. I did have it on actually, so I did. I pressed the like button. But then Zeb's called me a fed and I had to turn it off. Never again. Zeb called me a fed and I clicked off the like, and then I clicked the dislike. And then I called Zeb a neocon dude, and that was that. No, just kidding. But the extension of this is that we do have moving pieces in the Aryan thing. So it's less so speculation, more so waiting for when it will happen. And so what we have, and I'll put this up on screen here. I probably should have this on screen actually a hot minute ago. But this is from AF Post. And this is one of two, I believe, major moves that have been made from the United States military, but this is one of them. And then it's a U.S. Air Force C-17 Globemaster departing from Germany, is flying southeast and has entered Middle Eastern airspace with a second aircraft appearing to follow a similar initial route. And this is obviously alarming. And I think it's just a matter of time until the moment strikes. And so I think it will matter, like, how's the weather, right? They already told us they did it in Venezuela, so probably similar operations are occurring there. But the point here would be, it's about to happen. But the crux of what they're going to be doing with it, and what they've said they would do with it, is they're going to, if Iran can't contain the protest, that's why we're going to bomb them. So it's insane. And understand this, like, understand that where we went from. At first it was, we have to stop Iran from getting the nukes. They're super close to developing the nukes. They don't like actually have them. We don't think they have them yet. But they're like really close on the edge, and they're threatening to just take their enriched uranium right into their nuclear facility and then make the bomb. And who knows, it could be weeks, right? Then, people want to remember this, it's only for a little bit. Then we moved to, well, if they continue their ballistic missiles program, we're going to bomb them. If we move to their if they keep making the ballistic missiles at the rate they are, obviously in preparation to fight Israel, then we're going to bomb them. Now it's moved to, if you can't contain the protest, really, if you can't contain the color revolution that the CIA has started in your country, we will kill you. If you can't handle the problem that we started in your own country fluently, we will bomb you. We'll start a war with you. It's like, do you see how obviously like insane this pattern is, how insane this path is? And I mean, it's entirely indefensible, like entirely indefensible, completely. And this is what I would say too. This is what I would say to all the anti-interventionists. If you want a world that people like stop having these global conflicts over, you should be pro-nuclear proliferation. If every country had even a couple nukes, maybe even just one, I think North Korea only has one, just a couple nukes, you would get a lot less intervention. The number one way to protect against regime change is possessing a nuclear arsenal. Thus, we see the problem here, right? And so it's either like some powers are given the trust that they will better police others, or everybody's gets an equal playing field. So that would be my argument for anti-interventionists. It's like, if you're an anti-interventionist, you should be pushing for nuclear proliferation for everybody. Everybody should have a nuke then. Everybody should have a nuke. Everybody should get a big red button. And then we'll see if everybody comes to the table. Just a thought, just a theory. Because when you think about all the other nations that aren't being invaded, well, what do they possess? Like, why didn't we go after like North Korea, obviously? And that's part of the reason why I see this. I've seen this video, and it was Kim Jong-un like petting his nuclear missile like in the facility. And it's like, of course he loves that thing. Of course he does. Because he has the ability to use it. Now, I don't think it goes very far at all. And I don't think they have even shown the range at which the nuke can go. So it could just be largely speculation that it's like, we just don't want to touch it because like they maybe have got some capabilities, but who knows? But regardless, I would push that. Not that I'm in favor either which way but dealing with the hypothetical, if the goal was anti-intervention, I would posit that I think the best way to get that would be to pursue nuclear proliferation for every country in the world. But should all of Africa have nukes? No, not even close. But that's the point that I'm making, and you would avoid a lot more regime changes there. Now, would it be better positive externalities on the outside of that, or would we be better off with regime change? It's like, I don't know. We'd have to see. That's a bit of a speculation. But on to the main crux of everything today. And it's insane that I've already been ranting for 50 minutes and I've not touched on much of this. This is insane. I talk too much, apparently, guys, and I apologize. So here's the first thing. We have now Colombian President Gustavo Petro is taunting Trump. And I wouldn't even take a listen to this because I think he's speaking in Spanish and I literally can't stand that shit. Forgive me, I shouldn't curse. This is from the Election Wizard. This is one of these people who have been posting fake videos as well, too. And basically says, come get me, coward. I'm waiting for you here. I would say that's pretty ballsy. Pretty ballsy given the fact that despite Trump's remarks about Greenland and being a bit over the nose on those kind of comments, the Prime Minister, I think it's Prime Minister, not President, the Prime Minister of Greenland came out and said, all right, we're open to business with Trump. He saw what happened to Maduro and he was like, oh man, it looks like we'll negotiate, guys. looks like we'll have a conversation here. Maybe we will. I will say the highlight of this entire thing has to be in the fact that, like, dude, Maduro did look just like Dr. Disrespect. Like, that was crazy. In addition to this, we also have a bit of this kind of split here, which is a lot of these libertarians, a lot of these extreme anti-interventionists, right? So this kind of ropes in people like Dave Smith, Clint Russell, and people like Jeffrey Sachs. And so I'll save the video, but Jeffrey Sachs essentially tells and gives a list of demands of what the United States should do, demanding that we remove our Navy and release the blockade. We pull out of Venezuela's perimeter altogether. And, you know what, we'll go ahead and take a listen to some of his claims here. But I think this is a bit of what Nick Fuentes was pushing back against, which was like this, regardless of like any intervention. And I think that's the point that maybe has a bit of needs the exploration. because it seems like some people are against intervention, period, regardless, no matter what, no matter benefit or cost or whatever. They view intervention at any kind at all as being immoral. And that would probably be closer to like where Scott Horton is at, which I saw Scott Horton push back on Martyr Made, which is kind of a beef I was not expecting to see. But I would say that is that's not where I'm at, right? I don't believe that all intervention is poor at all. I mean, I'm the person who would make positive arguments for the opening crusades and why they were good. And those were offensive crusades. And I do think there's an argument to be made. The best defense is a good offense. And I think that those sayings don't come out of nowhere. But here's Jeffrey Sachs again on his kind of list of demands of like what the United States should do as like the UN and how they should walk away from Venezuela.
Words of the charter, the UN was created, quote, to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow to mankind. Given that we are in the nuclear age, failure cannot be repeated. Humanity would perish. There would be no third chance. To fulfill its responsibilities under the Charter, the Security Council should immediately affirm the following actions. The United States shall immediately cease and desist from all explicit and implicit threats or use of force against Venezuela. The United States shall terminate its naval quarantine and all related coercive military measures undertaken in the absence of authorization by the UN Security Council. The United States shall immediately withdraw its military forces from within and along the perimeter of Venezuela, including intelligence, naval, air, and other forward deployed assets.
So that's the gist of it, obviously. He's just making all these demands and bringing him to a charter, pulling out completely. And I think, for one, that immediate kind of reaction and the kind of assumption of what's going on, I think is a little bit too quick. But regardless, to answer this from Miles Davis, he says, I'd like to hear Nick Fuentes explain how we in the United States, knowing what happened in Vietnam and Iraq, Afghanistan, could possibly control Venezuela. Logistically, how would that happen? Well, that's what he's been against. He's been against the nation building element of it. He's been against the occupation element of it. The boots on the ground, the let's spend 15 years building wells here while we watch people do sexually assault people across, the desert. That's what he's against. It's like this long-term occupation. I think what he's pro is exactly the way it happened, which was an extraction that took place in 30 minutes. And next thing you know, we have entirely shifted the scales on the power. On the geopolitical level, shifting the scales, we made a move in the geopolitical arena. And I think there's nuance and difference between what those different interventions look like. And also to make an extension there too, which is the secondary definition of war is described as with the duration of it. So with the duration element of war being an aspect, right? The duration and typically always talking about the brutality element of it. And I wouldn't say that this kind of seemingly matches up with that right now. Now, if it does get to the nation building and we're there, and it's an occupation of 10 years, then I would say, yeah, you could say it definitely was an armed conflict, to say the least. And I think that would still probably violate things like the just war theory. And that was the framing that I think was probably what maybe course corrected me a good bit. And I put this in the Discord for anybody who might have seen this, was from Tim Gordon. And Tim Gordon makes the claim, and Tim Gordon he calls himself, him and his crowd's called the parish orphans. And I don't think he typically genuinely agrees at all with the newest pope. However, that's a Catholic thing. You guys can have that. And not to downplay Catholics, I'm just saying that's a whole other argument that I don't want to talk about right now. Anyways, the point that he was making was that he posited that this would be illegitimate under St. Thomas's kind of breakdown of what falls under the boundary of a just war. And a just war being, maybe largely three tenets. Well, the third one typically is separated into two, but three larger ones. And essentially it's it is a moral response, right? First of all, I should say it is an equal response, that you are responding in equal force to what was applied to you. Secondarily, what you also have is it's for moral reasons, actually, that the war is for moral correction of moral wrongs, or is for a moral reason, and not for profit. And actually, that one by itself is one that I think it automatically fails, is that the for profit element that was a war being had For at least they would tell us, they're telling it on two ends. The fake pretext is that it was for drugs, and he's literally not. Maduro's not even being charged with drug charges at all. It's like a conspiracy to use a machine gun against the United States. I've never heard that in my life. Probably a black judge made it. Anyways, and that's what I began to think of, which is like, if that fails, and again, this is Tim Gordon's argument. I've not thought about it too much. I've been thinking about it all day, actually. And I'm unsure, because I think that you would have to qualify it with it being a war first, to then apply it to Aquinas's framework. And I think there's a lot of questions, and a lot of good questions to be asked, because Timothy Gordon was actually opposed, and people were saying that no, this would be legitimate under just war theory, and people were making opposing arguments there. And just to say, that's kind of the framing that I think we should be applying, especially as Christian nationalists, because I do think ultimately, like, if America First is to capture what it is to be a Christian nationalist, well then it has to be directed first and foremost by our Christian values, by Scripture, by God. And so that led me to some thinking, which is like, America first for the interest of Americans, but what stops that would be if it violates Christian principle. And so, like, I think you could make a lot of arguments, like, I mean, yeah, bombing the literal F out of like France for no reason might be in America's interest, just because, like, we'll go in and loot the resources, but that would be obviously immoral. So I do think there's some framing there that needs to be played with a little bit, I would say. Moving on from Jeffrey Sachs, though, Venezuela has actually begun ordering the arrest of anybody backing the United States attack. This was the next element that we have here. Venezuela has ordered police to hunt down and arrest anyone involved in promoting or supporting the U.S. military attack that led to Maduro's ouster. And I'm not sure, again, who knows if these photos are real? Could be AI generated, could be from 5 years ago. I don't know. But what I would say is it's clearly that there are people in the government that are still there that are unhappy and are using and still have influence and power and leverage and to that extent are still wielding it. So to show that not all things are, good in Venezuela. And I would say that the fact that they even had to announce the order of arrest of anybody back in the U.S. attack, I would say means that there are people probably who are celebrating in Venezuela, just to put that forward. Now, however, in addition to this, we got this from the Washington Post. And this is again from WAPO. From Midas Touch, actually, got the screen grab here. They say insanity. Sources close to the White House told the Washington Post that Trump lost interest in backing Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado to leave the country because she accepted her Nobel Peace Prize rather than demanding it be given to Trump, which was viewed as an ultimate sin. Now, again, this is from the Washington Post. Take it with a grain of salt. However, I find this to be very believable. I find this to be actually one of the most believable things I've read all week. To be quite literally honest with you, I think this is like I read this and was like, man, I didn't actually think about that one. Of course that happened. And who is this Maria Corina Machado? Well, Maria Corina Machado was supposedly who everyone was expecting the baton to be passed to, who the administration would have been willing to work with to install as the next leader of their Venezuela. And part of the reason for that was all of her obvious and public and overt pro-Zionism. And so much so, I can't think it was the Jerusalem Post that reported this or had the interview with her, but she explained her long-term goals of, moving the Venezuelan embassy to Jerusalem and all of these very, very strongly pro-Zionist things. And that would be in line. But now he's not doing it because of the Nobel Prize or whatever. But that still, if that were to be what followed, that would be in line with exactly what it felt like was going on in Argentina. Now we have an installation of a very pro-Zionist candidate. And now we have potentially, and then you also have Nayib Bukele as well too. And I'm unsure where he's at actually, and I need to look into that. But now that's El Salvador, Argentina, now Venezuela. And these are 3 South American countries that we have been very heavily involved with, and we've also been promoting too. And I think once we've got these candidates in there, you can see a lot of accounts that are promoting people like Nayib Bukele, right? What he did with the judges, what he did with the jails. And then Argentina, he's promoted as like similarly to what Elon Musk did with Doge. Like he cut afuera. Although when you dig deeper, their economy is flundering and like we have to get bailed them out by like the tune of $40 billion. So it is to say there's a through line here. There's a thread, there's a pattern of behavior that's been established. And that is that we are ultimately buddying up with these South American nations to better align our interest. but not just American interests. And that's the point that needs to be made. It's clearly that this is with a Zog bend to it. This is clearly also in the alignment and interest of Zionists and Israel, and that can't be ignored. Now, there was also other reactions, largely China and Russia, that I think are very, very important to look at. Global News reported that China says it cannot accept any country acting as a world judge or the world's policeman. Now, there was also footage of a Chinese ambassador who was essentially pleading and urging the United States to stop toppling the government of Venezuela. And what I would say is this: these nations have to say something. And that's because their people expect that they are in this opposition to America, and that they, and rightfully so, if there were Chinese officials who were caught in the crossfire, or that if this would harm China's oil interests in Venezuela, then they should rightly be putting out like, oh, hey, we shouldn't be doing this. This is against Chinese interests. This is against Russian interests. And so I wouldn't say that this is a clear sign of like, oh my gosh, World War III is coming. I mean, obviously, I think that's already happening. But I wouldn't put too much weight into this. The one that I would put weight into is the response we got from the former ex-president of Russia. And so the former ex-president of Russia, this blew me away. He said essentially that, well, to push back against the United States, but he said further than that, and I think I can find this here. I should put this on screen actually, because it's such a good quote. Ex-Russian president. Just so you know, I'm not talking out my ass. Well, hopefully I can pull it up here. I forget what his name is. It's like Menevdev. I don't know. Okay. Regardless, though, he had basically made the point. He was the ex-president of Russia. He'd made the point that because of the Maduro precedent, Russia would possibly look into doing a similar operation with Zelensky. So, take that for what you will. I think that was a little bit wild, but imagine if you did see Russia try to pull something off like that. Is it Medvedev? I thought so, dude. Like, why could I not think of that? Here we go. From Bricks News. Thank the Lord, dude. Whoever put that in there. Thank you very much. But again, this is from Bricks News, and this is where I saw it from. They said, just in former Russian President Medvedev, you Russian bastards, threatens to remove Ukrainian President Zelensky from power following the U.S. attack on Venezuela. Quote, his removal was something that could happen in the near future. After the Maduro precedent, it would be more justified. And I thought that was just crazy, just reading that. Now, obviously, he's the ex-president, and he's not in power, and I would imagine he's not in power. Probably influential, I would imagine, but not in power, not Putin. So just to make note that obviously the rest of the world is also reacting to this. It's obviously not everybody's clapping for the, what's the word? Not everybody's clapping for, America's, newly acquired vassal state of Venezuela. Not everybody is cheering it on. And so Maduro, as of right now, he just arrived in New York City earlier today by helicopter. He's also being escorted by the DEA, which is a literal joke, again, because he is not being charged as of right now in the Southern District of New York for any kind of like extreme narco terror charges. And as much as I've read into it, of the charges are, it feels very Trumpian, the way that they did Trump almost, which is like they just like are writing pieces of paper, things out on a piece of paper. What I would say to this is, I don't understand, and maybe I'm just retarded about this. What I don't get about this, and I'm just going to put this forward here, is it seems nonsensical to me. The reason why it seems nonsensical to me is because we clearly felt that we had enough evidence to carry out a literal whole armed conflict extraction, killing I think it was reported about 80 Venezuelans, to get their president extracted and bring him to America because of said evils and said alleged sins that him and his nation state are committing against America and others. But now we're going to put him on trial? Like, we were convicted enough to literally take him and his wife out of his home and remove the head of state from an entire nation publicly. But now we're going to see if he's going to stand up to charges in court? Like, what? Does that not just come across as like the most insanely like nonsensical, like I can't even make sense of that at all in the slightest? So that adds another element of it too. And I think even with that as well, going back to the photo here, you know, there's like been multiple outfits and Maduro's been seen in, and again, he's like smiling, he's got his thumbs up. I think he's very overtly, yeah. And maybe it is all theater, but I think he's very overtly feeling good about his chances in court, which is just an insane thing, because then what does that look like? We do all that with Venezuela, and then our own courts find him not guilty. Like what then? Right? Like how do we find our way out of that one? Right? And so overseeing his case is Alvin Hellerstein, who is exactly what it sounds like. Yes, he's Jewish and he's Orthodox Jewish. But in addition to that, Alvin Hellerstein oversaw most 9/11 civil lawsuits. Crazy, right? How that somehow finds its way in there. Now, the one thing though that I did pick up that's kind of wild is that representing Maduro as defense attorney is none other than Barry Pollack, who defended Julian Assange. So looks like we're going to be getting a major kind of legal battle going on, which is insane to think that the legal battle will take longer than the conflict. Like, insane. And then Trump says, I think the point of this was just to get him away, to just do regime change. And I believe so too. I think that I think it's very overtly obvious this was done twofolded to me. I actually do right now lean towards where Dave Reilly and Ryan Dawson are positing the Strait of Hormuz, given some of what I saw from the articles posited afterwards. And the U.S. benefit here, in addition to that, is also the removal of him as the regime. And moving him head of state, giving us enough time to, you know, supposedly get these Paul Singer contracts out to ExxonMobil and whatnot. Or what is it? Citgo? Not ExxonMobil, it's Citgo. Forgive me. And again, yes. So right now, so yesterday, I would say I was at a wait and see position. Today, I'm at it's looking awful right now. It's looking miserable. It's looking like, once again, we asked for A and we got Z. It's like, hey, it's a letter of the alphabet. And it's like, yeah, but it couldn't be any further from what I actually asked you for. And I think I'd already mentioned Kristi Noem, you know, she's encouraging Venezuelans to apply for refugee status. And then the White House said, like, no, she didn't. She ended it. And then you have this bit of a back and forth. So if she says it verbatim on Fox News, you can, and we encourage you to apply for refugee status. But at the same time, other people and the DHS themselves are positing that they're now encouraging Venezuelans to go back to Venezuela. Okay. I'm going to err on the side of Occam's razor, and I think that the simple solution is that the government's lying to me. And I think that we're just going to get more brown people, not less. So, moving on from there, though, Leading Report was told, and this is from Leading Report, that oil companies were told beforehand, and that Trump has said that oil companies were told of the attack on Venezuela before it happened. Reuters, literally 10 minutes before I went live, now got reports from, I believe it was like ExxonMobil and a few other companies. They put forward statements saying that they did not have conversations with anybody before the strike, that they were not informed beforehand. So there's that. Now, in addition to who is these individuals, who are these oil companies, put some face to some names, to some individuals here, so some subjects. Lord, forgive me. This is from the UNN, Unity Newsnet, don't really know what it is. But they write, the man said to benefit the most from any deal on Venezuela's oil is disaster capitalist Paul Singer with his Elliott Management Investment Fund. Singer has a history of closing factories and destroying Midwest U.S. towns. Singer frequently donates to militant Jewish and pro-Israel causes, including BBYO and Hillel. And so when you read in a little bit into this, and I have a screen grab here that does a better job, from Uncommon Sense, this was actually sent into the Discord from House, actually, into the tinfoil hat section. He says, well, and yes, he is Jewish. Paul Singer, through his firm Elliott Management, is deeply involved with Venezuela's debt crisis, famously pursuing full repayment from the country for defaulted bonds, leading to legal battles, and most recently, a court-mandated auction where Elliott's entity, Amber Energy, won the right to buy the U.S. subsidiary of Venezuela's state oil company, Citgo, in late 2025 for $5.9 billion to satisfy debts owed to creditors like Elliott. Singer's strategy involves buying distressed sovereign debt and aggressively using courts to seize assets, a practice often labeled vulture capitalism, with Venezuela being a prime example. And what was the similar thread to the Argentina story? Well, the similar thread was that the billionaire who had put Scott Bessent on, and who was the reason why Scott Bessent was close to Soros, was in Scott Bessent's ear about losing his investments and money in Argentina. And then next thing you know, Argentina is being bailed out. And so it seems like there is this kind of connection here between these administration officials and this kind of vulture capitalism as it extends to these other sovereign nations. And so I would imagine that's not the primary reason, but it is one of the reasons and one of the people who will be benefiting from what's going on here. Now, I wanted to also bring this up so you know I'm not just straight up lying to you. This is Paul Singer talking about the story of how he made money off Argentina, and again, the same way. How he made $2 billion from Argentina's economic collapse over 15 years ago. And this is from Paul Singer himself.
Somewhere in the late 90s, early 00s, the debt started trading down into the 80s and then 70s. It was still paying. And many people thought that they would go default. And we didn't. We knew that they had a history of default, 3-4 times in 150 years. We also knew that they were coming out of World War II, I think the 7th, maybe the 8th largest economy in the world. So, lots of resources, lots of capacity. We didn't think it was a good idea, and we didn't think they would default. They defaulted, and the bonds, and we bought performing bonds. The bonds started collapsing, and it was a long time. I don't remember the exact time. It was a long time before they gave their first offer. Okay. Now, sovereign restructurings come in different flavors, and I don't want to oversimplify, but I think my categories are broadly right. There's a category of countries that have nothing, and you're not going to get anything, and you're just being annoying by going after them. So Argentina is a real country, and after some period of time, I think it was in years, an extraordinary period of time for a sovereign restructuring. They came in with a 29-cent deal. Well, maybe it was 30 cents. Now, a 30-cent recovery deal for a sovereign restructuring is a number that might be appropriate for a Guatemala or a Honduras or something, Ecuador, I don't know.
So just to give you a bit of an insight into like the structuring here from Paul Singer and the way he views these things, what was insane to me is like when you think of like the big wigs that are here in like the United States. Oh, I have like all my overlay stuff turned off. I apologize. I was going to record a video earlier and I got sidetracked, but I'm recording it later on. The through line here, I hate to say through line, the similarity here and comparison here would be when you think of like the kind of big wigs here in the United States, they talk about like shorting companies. And you think of like when hedge funds get together and they put on shorts for companies that they expect to fail, they drive them down to fail. It's wild to think that you have people who are so big, so wealthy, that they are betting on entire countries to fail. And that's like a network of businesses. Now, not any one business in particular, but I would imagine many businesses only solely operate in these countries. I'm sure there's many businesses that are Argentinian only, right? And we just don't know about them because they're not, you can't even read the sign. And so to think that there's like, these billionaires are doing this with their money, like basically betting on the economic collapse of whole countries or trying to find a way to extract wealth out of such is just, to me, it's just an insane concept. And it's so far outside the bounds of like what feels natural and like what should be accepted in a righteous and moral world. And this might even sound a little bit left wing, but like to me, it's just like it is so far out the bounds of like what I can even presume to be ethical. I mean in the slightest. And I know that there's there's reasons for this, and you can say it goes the other way around. Like the investment from these people into these bonds also can help bolster the country. But largely, it seems to be more often than not they're expecting and hoping that it fails, and like also paired with the fact that they do the vulture capitalism and they go to the courts to help seize assets on defaults. It's a very disgusting thing, and I think it's one of these other elements where obviously a lot of bad things go on, and obviously a lot of them are like, physical, and you see violence and stuff. But this is one of those ones where it's like it feels almost victimless, and it's just money exchanging hands, but it's not. It's not even close to being victimless, and it feels like it's like S tier way of being evil. It's like when you are playing with that many lives at once. So maybe that sounds a little bit leftist, but to me it was like that, just like hearing that, and like we're expecting Argentina to fail. Like, oh dang, that's crazy. Beyond there though, that was a bit from Paul Singer. Thomas Massie is again leading the charge against the Trump administration. And so this is just, it's crazy. This tweet went nuclear. And so Thomas Massie has this here. And again, this is in the vein of the oil. And so Thomas Massie says that it seems obvious from this video that the administration worked with big U.S. oil companies before the attack to line up billions of dollars in capital for developing Venezuela's oil reserves, yet they couldn't be bothered to consult Congress. And here's the short clip that Massie posted.
We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country. And we are ready to stage a second and much larger attack if we need to do so. So we were prepared to do a second wave.
And so I think that's what most people, when they see this, and in this kind of vein from Thomas Massie as well, I think what they do see is it does pull on that kind of left wing, like it's the billionaires, right? It's the billionaires, it's the elites kind of energy. I think that's what he's tapping into here, is that it's going to be these elites, these major billionaires who already work for these big, U.S. oil companies. They will be the ones who are working in tandem. And I think the one point to be made there is kind of crazy. Is like, if they were actually, now there's conflicting reports, but I would tend to believe that they probably did consult, at least at the very minimum, Paul Singer. But they didn't bring it to Congress. I think a lot of people are disturbed by that. I think a lot of people are going to view this as, whether it is a war or a AUMF, they're going to be disappointed that it was not brought to a vote. However, I think the best point that I'd seen against this actually was from Nick. And Nick had said, do you guys even hear yourself? Like, you're asking that Trump should have brought this to Jasmine Crockett to vote on. And I thought that was a really good point, because I do think in the end, though, when you do look at Congress, you go, wait a minute. The only person I do respect in there is Thomas Massie. Who would I care about everybody else voting or getting a say in that? Because they're all either Zogs or left-wing idiots, for lack of better words, unfortunately, race hustlers, etc. They're all a bunch of people on there for something else beyond themselves. And I do hear you, biggest thickest. I covered that actually closer to the beginning, because there's conflicting reports now coming out about how the handling of the oil will go. Chris Martinson had put a good post together about that, talking about the refining process and how ultimately it would actually not be profitable at all. So I put that forward too. Also, with the oppositional claims being that no, that's not the case, and no, it's not even close to being novel. I heard a bit of this from the Beardson side of the debate with Durenat, which was that the only places that can refine what Venezuela has is in America, outside of Venezuela, I think is what he was saying. So there are operations, obviously, in Venezuela that can do at refinery. But as Zeb Boykin said earlier, if he's still in here, is that would probably ultimately lead then to being boots on the ground if we're having to use Venezuelan infrastructure to even get that oil in a position to get it back on the boats to take to America. So there's that. And getting on to some of these fake videos, some of these series of these fake videos, actually, that I want to highlight here too. I think this is a screenshot from somebody, from Glenn Greenwald, of all people. He says, absolutely fantastic. Bang up job from independent media, spreading mega viral fake videos to millions, all to serve the United States government's war propaganda aims, putting corporate media to shame. Just keep retweeting these fake videos, even if false, they spread joy and purpose. Obviously being a bit facetious, but you can see this. This is from, I don't know who this person is, but it's Wall Street Apes. And you can see this is a prominent kind of right-wing account here, largely maybe more so in the conspiracy wing than right-wing. But WSA, and then right here, videos AI generated. And I saw a couple of these. They were kind of insane. This is one from Alex Jones. And this, again, is not from the current state of Venezuela. The video that he posted in tandem with the current context of information was from July 29th, 2024. In addition, you have Nick Shirley himself posting another video, which is that the video here depicts Venezuelan exiles celebrating the U.S. capture of Maduro in Miami, not inside of Venezuela. Now, I would say that's actually closer to it, but these aren't the people who are in Venezuela. Like, they didn't want to be there anyways. They didn't want to be near Maduro, so you would expect they would act that way. Beyond there, you also have somebody like Jorge Macri, but there was also people like Benny Johnson and a few others. Somebody posted one that was literally so abysmally obvious that it was AI. It was just incredible to even watch somebody try to even get away with that, to be honest. And I don't know if that was Alex Jones or if it was Benny Johnson who posted that one. And in addition to this, you now have members of the Venezuelan opposition demanding Maduro's release. And so this is, again, per Glenn Greenwald, per pamphlets. But he writes, now that the mega viral videos spread by Trump influencers were exposed as frauds, and we see the real videos of Venezuelans in that country demanding their sovereignty, MAGA will return to, quote, Venezuelans are dirty third world pygmies who don't share our values or culture. Who cares what they think? And what you can see here is this from pamphlet. Even members of the Venezuelan opposition are now demanding Maduro's release. And so to look a little bit into this video here, I'll turn the sound off. Probably better. I don't see any of them right now, but you should see some of these portraits of Maduro.
A huge march stretched through the city today, full of people who support Nicolas Maduro, who support the government, but also many people who don't, who never supported Nicolas Maduro. But what unites all of them is that what happened they find unacceptable. They simply cannot accept that America came. They bombed Caracas, their capital. They kidnapped Nicolas Maduro, and they thought that they could dominate Venezuela.
So, just to show you, MAGA's lying to you largely outright with fake videos, trying to build the sentiment that everybody in Venezuela widely accepted this. They would have you believe that the heavens cheered for this action, quite frankly, and that's just simply not the case. And so I just wanted to show that to you to show, objectivity here. But again, at the same time, take it for what it is. I saw this was also being pushed by RT as well, and so obviously that's oppositional state media, so they're going to have their own biases they would like to push too. So, with that in mind, there's a lot of things we've got to make sure you keep in mind in a grain of salt. And again, that's why this is very complex. I wish there was a lot more simple solutions to a lot of these things. But again, the longer that a lot of this has evolved, with the intelligence agencies, with the PSYOPs, with the going from 4th generation to 5th generational warfare, there is so much more that needs to be explained and looked at and thought about and examined because there's just that many more tools on the table, like the range of tools on the table to kind of destabilize, lie, be dishonest, push something out there that's like kind of fake, maybe half not, an anti-truth, like Tucker Carlson says, is so wide-ranging now that it's like, it's just hard to take anything at all at face value, which is not to say like, you don't believe anything. I think there are certain things that you can believe with a good sense of intuition, but it is to say like, as AI continues to grow and as the lies become more obvious and people grow more tired of it, I think it does inspire a lot of extra disbelief that might not have been inspired there previously, ultimately. We have this from Benny D here. Appreciate the super chat, brother. Thank you very much. I don't have the overlay on, unfortunately, but what does he say here? He says, even if it ends up benefiting both Venezuela and the United States, I'm worried our retarded government will use the success to justify hitting Iran. They never let any good or bad situation go to waste. Well, I mean, quite frankly, I would expect Iran is going to be getting hit by tonight, if not tomorrow night. These things seem to move pretty quickly. I can't imagine they would sit and wait on it to let sentiment build up against Iran. I think they would take the chance as soon as they possibly could. The only issue is I do think, given the fact that the Venezuelan, and here's the thing though, because they're not going to be going to Iran to extract anybody. I don't think they would even attempt to try to get Khamenei out. And there already have been reports that Khamenei is got a escape plan already hatched, which would be he'll go to Moscow, just like, Syria's leader, al-Assad, I think is his name. Dude, there's so many foreign names, I can't get them straight. But I think that's exactly where it's going. And it's unfortunate because I was, really hoping that they wouldn't be, but it was obvious. And I think the strategic objectives of these nations were, if you pay deep attention to them, they were clearly pursuing them continually, even without bullets flying. Was it Assad? Yeah, thank you. And again, thank you for the super chat. I appreciate that greatly. Thank you very much. And because obviously it helps run the show. Donations in Google AdSense only, apparently. Then we have these pamphlets here, but Luke Rukowski and also Dominic Michael Trippi were highlighting how old some of the footage was. And this was another one. Let me put this back up on screen. This is he says, how old is this footage? This is another one of these, kind of just like general MAGA accounts, right? Election Wizard. They're like, they do the follow trains. They're like, hey, tweet hashtag MAGA and I'll follow you. Kind of like that kind of slop. And what is this? What do they say? The statue of former dictator Hugo Chavez is dragged to the streets of Venezuela. But they don't add much context beyond there, but they've only posted it 11 hours ago. This would leave you and any other person watching it or reading it without this context here to believe that this is kind of this must be what's happening in Venezuela right now. But it's not. And the footage is from 2024. And so you have Luke saying that, you have Dominic also saying it, and so I would imagine he was the one who pushed forward the community note there, but it's aggressive, and it's all over. It's not even just the big influencers. It's like the entire MAGA network is posting this stuff and moving forward with it. And it's just incredible how shameless they can be, to be honest with you. And one other element that kind of was, I don't really know how to think about it. I think it's already kind of got an easy answer to it, but we'll see. And that's from AF Post, and they write here, that's blocking all of it. Forgive me. Deportation flights to Venezuela haven't been suspended following the capture of Nicolas Maduro. A Department of Homeland Security spokesperson informed ABC News on Monday. DHS didn't confirm as to whether any removals have taken place since Saturday, but ICE Flight Monitor reports that no deportation flights have departed for Venezuela since December 12th. And so, I don't really know, to me, that could also be explained simply by, just to give a defense, a very weak defense, that could be explained by the fact that they wanted this operation to happen much earlier than what it did. I believe there was reports that the earliest they wanted to do it was on not New Year's Eve, on Christmas Day actually, or even maybe a bit after the Christmas Day. But they wanted to do it on New Year's Eve, couldn't, until they had to do it 4 days later. That could be part of it, which is not deporting people and then bombing the country less than a month after you dropped off all those people there. I think that would obviously be one thing, and especially if you caught them in the crossfire, people would be running to the courts back in America to try people for that, for war crimes, etc. So I don't think that's too much of a story, but it is out there and want to bring your attention to it. And I've made mention multiple times about the whispers online about the let me click on the right one, about these kind of tensions and what's driving it also geopolitically as well. And one of them is this aspect of China's control over silver and their increasingly major supermajority supply of, or dominance of. Now, Health Ranger writes this. Now it's abundantly clear. The Department of Defense and JP Morgan went into business together to build a huge new metal smelting facility in the United States. It will handle silver and other critical minerals. The conquering of Venezuela was necessary to acquire mining operations there, which had been diverting silver and rare earth materials to China. Now those metals will come to the United States of America, depriving China of the significant supply of silver and other metals. Pillaging works, apparently, and JP Morgan is long on millions of ounces of silver, as JPM already exited its short positions on the metal. As the silver squeeze worsens, Trump, the Department of Defense, and JP Morgan are setting up their own silver operation that will be worth tens of billions of dollars because of the mineral wealth the USA is stealing from Venezuela, a la economic hitman techniques. There's nothing more profitable than stealing someone else's oil, silver, and gold. Just ask Bush. So just to pose that, and he has a screen grab here with this article here. And it says U.S. secures silver smelter deal to process latam metals. Latam metals, I think is actually the right way you say that. Financed by J.P. Morgan, jointly owned by the United States Department of Defense. And that opening paragraph says that the Korea Zinc plans a $77.4 billion investment to construct a large-scale non-ferrous metal smelter in Clarksville, Tennessee, a project U.S. officials say will materially expand domestic critical minerals processing capacity and strengthen supply chain security. And the reason why this is important is because, and he doesn't put it here, at least not anywhere I can find, at least I can read, because on the other side of that is that there is this, what I've seen whispers of, I've not seen any kind of deep, kind of like full-blown reporting on it, but I have seen some of it. And it's this idea that there's this real concern that China has basically been almost monopolizing all the silver in the world. Now, not like they're like sitting there hoarding it all, because that would be an insane thing if they had all of it across the world. They don't yet. But that was what seemed to be people were pushing at underneath everything else that was being reported, was that there is these strong tensions based on the way that China was essentially shutting down its exports of silver while sitting upon, I think, the biggest supply in the entire world. And so maybe that was perhaps partly what was driving a lot of this, these tensions and the need to act and the urgency of such to get ahead of China and make sure we can cut China off so we don't get completely boxed out of silver. And so there's also another through line there too. Andrew Tate put out a statement on Venezuela, which was just, you could come to expect it, I guess, but I saw that Nick responded to it. And it was just funny because it's like him just saying, like, of course we did. Like, who better to run the world than America? And that's what I would say too, to offer like where my head was at and where it still is in terms of American interest in the geopolitical sense, still would be going back to like this idea of you have to look at things not only just in the short term, but in the long term as well. And if on a long enough timeline, that the inaction of America or the hands-off approach, or if we do move to an isolationist, we say no to the empire, we pull out like Afghanistan and all these different kind of geopolitical arenas that we're in. Sure, we could escape fine and possibly, salvage as much as we could. But at the same time, I don't think it's in America's interest for either China or Russia to be the world global power. At the same time, I also don't think it would be in the interest for America to be in even a position like where the Saudi Arabia is at, where they're kind of like this tier 2 country, where they are unable to determine their own future, given the fact that they are so weak compared to the other ones that they essentially have to partner up with somebody else or attach themselves to somebody else. And that's where I step in, which is like, in terms of American interest, if it is in terms of you're also making this choice and decision to maintain the resources to repel a potential 20, 30 year acquisition of the top spot from China or Russia, I think that would be in America's interest. I think it would be in all Americans' interest that their futures weren't determined by China, that their futures weren't determined by Russia. And I think that's an easy kind of, for me, it's an easy kind of push there. I would say that I do agree though, biggest, but at the same time, that is what Beardson was pushing forward too, which is like, again, like what I said earlier, it's like, just because if it benefits Americans and it benefits Israel, we don't need to just immediately go, that's just bad. Like the metric being, if it benefits Israel in any way, despite how much it benefits Americans, we got to throw it away. I liked what Sam Parker had said, which is the better question, which is, because we are so uniquely tied together and because that's seemingly not going away anytime soon, despite all of our efforts outside of that, is that it's obvious over this period of time, 40, 50, 60 years, this incestuous relationship that of course we're kind of joined at the hip. So it would make sense that things that benefit us would also benefit them. But Sam Parker, to once again rephrase his question there, then again saying, again, the better question to ask is what the relativity of it. Is it benefiting Americans a lot more than Israel, or vice versa, is it benefiting Israel a lot more than America? And I think, and if that's the question, if that's what you're seeing, which I think we are, which is this clearly was a move that seemingly is just opening the ramp for Israel to do what they want, or Israel, for America to help Israel do what they want to Iran. I think it's becoming more obvious that it's going to potentially be much more beneficial to the state of Israel than it was to the Americans at large. And I think you get from the super chat from Benny D again. He says, not silver, rare earth minerals, using everything from cell phones, computers, batteries, i.e. anything high-tech related. China has bought up rare earth reserves from multiple countries. Yes. But specifically, it's, and again, this is why I've not touched on it too much, because I've only seen a bit of the whispers. That's why I have the Health Ranger article. I'll put it up on screen. this is something I've seen by many of these kind of big, like older InfoWar guys for the last week or so, is this, there's something going on with silver. Specifically, let me do this right here. He has right here. Depriving China of the significant supply of silver and other metals. And that's a through line that I've seen multiple times over the last week or so. And it seems to be there's like this fear almost that China is sitting on like an extreme majority of silver. Now you could be right. It could be more than just silver. And if that's the case, that's even more insane and more dangerous. But again, like this is another element. This is one that we saw during COVID. And you think of, oh yeah, make sure you smash the like button. If you don't hit the like button, I'm assuming you're gay or you're a federal agent. One of the two. Whatever's worse in your mind, actually. But what did we get during COVID? Well, it was quickly realized that during COVID that China produces about 80+% of all the pharmaceuticals that America consumes. Meaning that like if we were to suddenly lose access to all these pharmaceuticals, that'd be a lot of people who'd be real needy real quick. And so it would be in America's interest that we make the pharmaceuticals, that we not buy them from China, that they not exist in the hands of somebody else. Now, however, there are ways to go about that don't include having to, bomb China and take their pharmaceuticals. There's a way that you can begin and inform the manufacturing and industry in your own nation. You don't need to just bomb people to go take their stuff. And if anything, I do think that was probably the best argument that Doomernet had against Beardson. And then I'm just trying to be objective, and so this is what both sides are. There's a split here in the dissident right. And on the one side of it, Doomernet did bring up, which you guys will probably remember, that Maduro had offered like an extremely like high stake in like their oil and their resources shortly before. And Doomernet was making the point, like, listen, like, there was a way that we could have went about this that didn't even need to go to violent conflict. Like we could have negotiated a deal. And outside of the reports that we're getting that it was Maduro dancing and mocking Trump was what broke the straw that broke the camel's back, which is insane to think if that's true, but I would believe it. But again, to make the point though that Doomernet was the extension of Doomernet's argument there was like we could have done things that would have been through trade. We could have done things that would have brought Maduro and aligned him a lot more with where we are. Ultimately, that's not going to happen as long as he's a vocal anti-Zionist. But an extension of that, though, would be if we were to better align ourselves with like Venezuelan interests too, in terms of what would be politically beneficial for trade, then that would be a natural repellent to both Russia and China, ultimately getting two birds in one stone. The natural repellent being that if we have a friendly relationship with them, it's not a defensive alliance or anything. It's like we're both mutually benefiting a lot from trade. Why would the country want to get rid of that? So that being said, ultimately, because if you look at the results of what Venezuela was getting in terms of their other deals, I mean, their air fleet was essentially, it was like their air force in Venezuela is essentially made up of like 25 different fighter jets that are all like older than 2008. And their air defense systems were all literally taken out in like 10 seconds. So when you look at the extent of like what Iran, Russia, and China was able to provide Venezuela, I would imagine America would have been able to do that all the way the same. And if anything, it would make more sense that America would provide defense equipment to Venezuela for a trade partnership if they are essentially our Ukraine, providing a bunch of these minerals and stuff for us, being our breadbasket of the Southern America. But we didn't. So it's kind of where we are. And we also said JD Vance's home was targeted. This is kind of another story that probably isn't going to get much play just because everything else is going on and nobody really cares. But speaking of JD Vance, one thing that was noticeable about these recent events was that I think Marco Rubio basically went from a non-existent chance to being president or, winning the 2028 election. I think he was like around like 2 or 3 or 4%, something like that. He actually shot up to 7, so essentially doubled from where it was at, if not more than that. And I think there's a sign and an argument to be made. And I think a lot of people probably agree with this. I think the establishment would much prefer Marco Rubio to be the president and not JD Vance. So it also begs the question of like, are JD and Marco on different teams? Are they on the same faction? Like, what are they there to bolster each other? But when you just see, like, when he's being floated out like he's the potential new Venezuelan president, you see some of the metrics flipping as they are. It becomes a bit curious as of, why is Marco Rubio all of a sudden getting this boost shortly after the back of what felt like the pressure was beginning to be pressed upon J.D. Vance to give a statement on America First and Nick Fuentes and the kind of current state of the union of the conservative right. So, just a thought. Do they serve different Jews? Is it one serves Adelson, the other works for Paul Singer or something? You would think they'd be on the same side, to be honest with you. Going to Tim Walz, though, this is the next big story I wanted to bring up. This episode's probably going to be a bit longer, so just be ready. This is from Nick Shirley. He says, "I ended Tim Walz." Wow, wonderful. Oh, I apologize. Somebody super chatted and I missed it. Apologize, brother. This is from Hal Niink. He says, "Christ is king. Do not accept compromise with heretics in order to make the world like you better." Amen. Amen. Christ is king. Christ was king. Christ always will be king. Thank you very much for that. And that's why I brought up the Tim Gordon thing with the just war theory was like, do we need to ensure that the Christian values are not being obliterated, if you will, right? Or we need to make sure that America First doesn't contradict in any way with Christian values. And so one of them needs to direct the other. And I think, in my opinion, the Christian values needs to dictate what is acceptable inside of American First policy, if you were asking me. And I would think most people would agree. So then that begs the question then, in terms of offensive capability and in terms of warfare and political and armed conflict, do we use St. Thomas's just war outline? Does that become the building block of how we decide what is and is not eligible to be pursued as a war pursuit, from our nation? So something to think about. But again, on screen here, I'm going to pull it over here. This is from Nick Shirley. He says, "I ended Tim Walz." And that is because following the news of the Somalian fraud, Tim Walz is stepping down. And it looks like there's a lot more than just the very, these low-end Somalian fraud. It looks like it's actually much, much worse. I think that somebody had said, instead of thinking about it being 12 billion or 18 billion, they said, think upwards of $50 billion. And so it may be insanely much worse. Yes, no, this is not a sponsorship at all of Nick Shirley. But just to open it up, this is what he tweeted. And look at this, right? 463,000 likes. So it's clear that not many people are getting the idea that Shirley is I wouldn't say it's controlled opposition, but he's not. He's a faux conservative. He's just a YouTuber, if anything. He's not a Christian nationalist. But he Tim Walz, not Nick Shirley, abruptly leaves his press conference without taking questions, and the reporters are pissed off. But he basically just dips out of there in a hurry. And here we go.
I'm proud of the way we treat our neighbors. I'm proud of the way that we welcome people to this state. I'm proud of the way that we innovate. And I'm proud of the way that we are optimists for the future. No one's taking this away from us. Not the fraudsters. Certainly not this president. Not on my watch. Tomorrow, I'll be back with you. I'll give you an update on America's best paid family medical leave program that is now a week into it. And at that time, I'll take all your questions. Thank you all.
Thank you, press. I'll be back tomorrow. Thanks, folks. More tomorrow. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And he's just gone. Just disappeared. He's heading out. And so Tim Walz's career ends in a fiery burst of flames as he flames out due to giving too many Chinese massage parlor special doubles in the back room to Somalians. And what was crazy about this was I followed this story. So following the news of Tim's step down, CBS reported that now 2,000 federal agents are heading to Minneapolis to arrest illegal aliens and investigate massive fraud. Again, per CBS, I really hope this is not going to get people's hopes up, and I do hope this does result in exactly what we're thinking of, which is a bunch of Somalians going the fuck back to their country. And again, forgive me for cursing. I promise my parents thought I'd get better at that. But in addition to this, so there's this, like, this is kind of like are we actually getting something right? Like, or is this like, or am I being an idiot? Like, and this is like succulent red meat. And I'm like, guys, they're finally doing it, guys. And it's like, who knows what it'll be? I mean, hell, dude, isn't it ICE and the National Guardsmen stationed all across the nation, and we're still not getting deportations? So who knows? It could be the same thing. No, now instead of having just Somalians here, they shouldn't be here. Now we're going to have 2,000 federal agents who could be doing something but aren't, and are more than likely just going to stand around and stare at everybody. Like, oh, I wonder what I can do. Like, I really hope it's not a joke, but I will maintain optimism because I think blackpilling all the way is ultimately not helpful. But here's the thing. These Hilton hotels in Minneapolis started canceling and disallowing any of the federal agents to stay there. So we got this from Homeland Security themselves. They posted this. Then added the Hilton hotels, they had launched a coordinated campaign in Minneapolis to refuse service to DHS law enforcement. And when officers attempted to book rooms using official government emails and rates, Hilton hotels maliciously canceled the reservations. This is unacceptable. Yeah, Chrissy Nome wrote this one. Why is Hilton Hotels siding with murderers and rapists to deliberately undermine and impede DH law enforcement from their mission to enforce our nation's immigration law? And so you can see this. This is kind of an email being sent to them. Per your upcoming reservation, after further details, we have found information about immigration work connected with your name, and we will be canceling your upcoming reservation. You should see a proper cancellation email in your inbox. Then it continues on. We've got inflows. Please pass this on. We're not allowing any immigration agents to house on our property. Now, what we got in the direct aftermath was that, per Nick Sotor and Fox News, they've already backtracked. And so this hotel, and the reason why I'm bringing this up, the best part's at the very end here. Not this, but the next thing. So they've already backtracked. And they said, what are you talking about? No, we're a welcome service. They said, we are investigating this matter with this individual hotel and can confirm that Hilton works with governments, law enforcement, and community leaders around the world to ensure our properties are open and inviting to everybody. So here's this quick minute clip, and then I'll show you the best part of this whole story right after this.
And Sandra, we're also tracking another story out of Minnesota this afternoon. DHS just posting on social media a short time ago, accusing the Hilton Hotel brand of refusing service to ICE agents in the state of Minnesota. This is their X post, essentially saying Hilton is doing a coordinated campaign to stop ICE officers from booking hotels in Minnesota. They posted a couple of screenshots of email exchanges showing staff at least one Hilton hotel telling them, we researched you, we found out you're immigration agents, and we are not going to provide you service. Sandra, I can tell you it is not a one-off. I've gotten texts from other ICE officers on the ground in Minnesota showing me screenshots of other Hilton hotels denying them service specifically because they are immigration agents. Our team on the ground is looking into it and has reached out to Hilton for comment. We'll update our viewers.
So here's the best part, right? So then they're getting reports, but this specific individual hotel, this is crazy. This particular hotel, the Hampton Inn Lakeville outside of Minneapolis, was bought for $15 million last summer, according to news reports. The LLC that was used to purchase the hotel is owned by 4 Indian partners. You ready for these American names? Parmjit Singh, Amatprit Hundal, Karandeep Nagra, and Lord have mercy, Mohanjit Kaur. I wonder why they don't want the ICE officers there. I wonder why they don't want immigration enforcement at their hotel. Could it perhaps be that these people also have overstayed their welcome? Could it perhaps be that these 4 Indians who purchased this hotel, who all went in together, did it under the same guise of all the fraud, but they're just Indians? They're like, look, we're in Minnesota. They're looking for the Somalians. We're okay. Just be as Indian as possible. They're not looking for us right now. It's and that's what I think is insane. And the point I would push here too is what everybody wants to leave out. And this is one of the conservatives' biggest things. Well, the faux conservatives, the Matt Walshes of the world. Well, maybe less so Matt Walsh. But like the homosexual conservatives, the ones that like are getting pounded at home and they cheat on their wives with men, the ones that are going Grindr, the Benny Johnson types. What they continually either omit or say doesn't exist is The 10 Little Indians is a great book. What they omit is that these other groups clearly and consistently show and exhibit in-group biases that exclude whites, and for example, for other races too. But they consistently omit that. But the behavior could not be more apparent when you look into it. And specifically, it gets worse the higher up, actually. And so, like, I really could care less that blacks want to be around other blacks and Indians want to be around other Indians, where they live. But where it becomes a problem, much like was explored about a year or two ago during the what was when it was sparking, which the H-1B visa debate, a year ago now, maybe 2 years ago. I'm getting old, dude. What we were getting with a lot of these spaces from people like Chief Trumpster, who are bringing in all these other software engineers, was they're talking about how basically they get essentially boxed out of applying for jobs. And like once an Indian becomes a CEO, they like make it their life mission to make the whole place Indian. And they'll find small ways they'll be rude. They'll fire people for no reason, just so they can hire their buddies from overseas or who are here already. And that's a huge problem. And like that's even with like the legal immigration element too. Like some of those could very well be legal, but it's still a problem. And they're practicing discrimination. Now, however, they're able to fully operate under the freedom of association, and essentially all races are, except for white people. And that is a real problem. And that is one of the things that most people, and that's what I tell people all the time, like not for everything do you need to listen to a show to know what's happening. Not for everything do you need to be reading X to know what's happening. Some of these things you just experience. Some of these things you just go outside and you can feel, you see, hell, sometimes you can touch, or you get touched by black fist when you are at the gym and you tell them that you don't care how much they're going to chimp out. True story, by the way. And I think that's kind of one of these elements that Gen Z is kind of undefeated on, which is the Gen Z is in the period, this is a generation that grew up with nothing. This is a generation, well, I hate to say nothing, they grew up in like a very modernized world, but the generation that grew up with essentially like no future and everything doesn't make any sense. And all the women are hypergamous. A lot of men feel very purposeless. And what you're seeing is a lot of men very, very convicted coming at the rest of the system saying like, this was not supposed to be this way. And so in that frame, they don't care. They already don't give a shit about everything else. They definitely don't care. And again, of course, they don't care about the fact that you're not supposed to say certain things about blacks. You're not supposed to say certain things about Indians. Don't care. They got nothing to live for, nothing to lose. What do they care? And that has been such a valuable tool against this kind of censorship apparatus, especially when it's like the youth. It's like the youth are doing it. It might be a bit easier to censor a bunch of like old people yelling, but it's hard to do when it's a bunch of youth and it's all like, 15, 16, all the way up to like 20, in their young 20s. And you got to think about it too. Like a lot of these people, and this blew me away too. That's how old we're getting. Is you're going to think like a lot of people in Gen Z, like were born after 9/11. They were born after the event that changed most people's lives. That opened up the door for most people to realize like, wait a minute, this system's not what I think it is. Whereas I would counter that, and I think that's what you could see with the Beardson and Doomer debate, actually, which is like Beardson does represent this kind of millennial persona. He's somebody who has been on, he probably grew up in a world that felt like it was livable, believable, and was worth it. I think a lot of millennials are like this. I think you can see a lot of that millennial energy where it's like they see like, they hold the optimism of like, this once was and could still be. Where Gen Z is on the other side of that, where it's like they've never seen what once was, and they don't think there ever could be. And I think that kind of explains a bit of this kind of change where it's like, and then I think that explains the difference between incrementalist and accelerationism, where the incrementalists are probably a lot more filled with millennials who are a bit older, who maybe feel like there was a bit more to salvage than what the Gen Z feels, where Gen Z is more inclined to go the accelerationist route. And again, just generally unfortunate at all to have any kind of large demographic of people feel like they have nothing to live for. That just implies naturally you're going to get radicalism, regardless of the direction. And beyond there, though, moving on from that, I want to make sure I cover the hotel one. One of the things I'll make a big point of is the fact that Vivek Ramaswamy was literally bullied off of X. Now, if we go to this one in particular, it's from First Class Clips on X. Pretty solid Clipper account. He hasn't followed me yet, though, so I don't know how real he is, actually. No, just kidding. But this is first class clips. And he says, Groyper's made Vivek Ramaswamy give up social media and you're blackpilling. LOL 2026 started off great. Now, what you'll see here is this is the screen grab that Nick posted. This is just the opening one. This is from the Wall Street Journal. Social media is a trap for politicians. I'm swearing off Instagram and X, where it's too easy to get a distorted sense of the public's concerns. And it's just insane. And it's insane that like now all the conservatives and everybody are, and specifically largely only conservatives, are talking about all these botting problems and how social media is not real life. But it's like social media at this point in time in the last 15 years hasn't been any closer to real life than what it is right now. If you go back 6 years, it was fake life. It was everybody under the sun who had a slightest bit of a breath of a conservative value didn't exist. And even if they did, they didn't say it. And, and this is despite all of the kind of the praise that he's heaped on Elon Musk for his platform and what he's done for free speech and opening up for people to say it. Now, Instagram's a whole other story. I could care less about Instagram. I don't even use Instagram. But what else was he right? So he goes on New Year's Eve, I deleted X and Instagram from my phone. So understand, he's still crashing out about Christmas, dude. And New Year's Eve was the straw that broke the camel's back. He saw white people kissing and happy, and he was done. He probably didn't delete X from his phone. What he did was he gently threw his phone 90 miles an hour at the wall. Probably. And he goes, but he continues, I'll spend my newfound time listening to more voters in real-world Ohio, developing more policies to make our state affordable, and being more present with my family. I predict that ending my consumption of social media will make me a better leader and a happier man. It's making him unhappy. Continuing from here, here's where he really starts getting into the argumentation. He says, worse, the online pulse that politicians glean from social media is increasingly manufactured by foreign actors and non-human bots. A recent report revealed that engagement, and he's citing the one that that even Matt Walsh said was bullshit. So understand that. A recent report revealed that engagement with the X account of the now notorious white nationalist Nick Fuentes, and this is crazy, Vivek calls him a white nationalist and everybody else who hates Nick calls him a civic nationalist. Insane, crazy. Shows signs of being unusually fast, unusually concentrated, and unusually foreign in origin. Well, some of us just have our post notifications on. Some of us just don't want to listen to literally probably anybody else outside of a few other rare examples. And it goes on, another investigation showed that hundreds of bots drove the pro-Democrat #BlueCrew hashtag, amplifying false claims that the assassination attempt on President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania was staged. Politicians who think they're taking social media cues from U.S. citizens are often mistaken. Here we are again. Now we're lazy, we're dumb, we're retarded, our culture sucks, and now don't even listen to us. It's all fake anyways. Just the crash out continues, man. In 2025, okay, hold on. This is the best part. Forgive me about the mic. In 2025, I saw a spat of shocking racial slurs and worse on social media. Forgive me. Ugh. Yet that same year, I visited tens of thousands of voters across all of Ohio's 88 counties. From inner cities to farms, union halls to factories, Republican rallies to one-on-one discussions with protesters, and I didn't hear a single bigoted remark from an Ohio voter the entire year. Let me tell you how 2026 is going to go, Vivek. You ready? You ready to understand the definition of a 180? Man, I am so excited to go gripe Vivek. You have no idea. Well, pause. Well, it's not too bad. I'm going to do things to Vivek. Pause. I'm going to make Vivek feel it. Pause. We are going to make Vivek feel it. I listen, I hope you know, we are, sounds almost gay, but it wasn't actually gay. You can get close. This is what I would say. one of the things, and this is going to be for me personally, because I live here, right? I live in Little India. I am telling you, despite everything going on today, like all the Venezuelan stuff, I can't explain to you guys. I like woke up today and like the only thing I could think of was like how badly I want Vivek to lose in Ohio. Like how badly, like I didn't buy, my parents got me a printer. It's perfect timing because I'm not going to be doing handsome truth level stuff, but I want pamphlets. I want people to know like what's going on. I want, like we're going full blown like Vivek expose. KC for Ohio, nothing less. No Indians, reject Indians. Maybe even a Sig Heil. We'll see. But like, dude, I am so excited for Vivek to not be a part of Ohio, and it does matter tremendously. And I think it'll be a huge statement of what happens with this Ohio race on the rest of the nation and what to expect. And I think it will be a sign to come how 2028 may go too. Exceptions will be made. There are some good no, dude, no, I'm joking. Now, if I say that, Zeb will call me a fed. Zeb will have a 2-hour episode breaking down that 3-minute clip of me saying something halfway joking about gay. And he's gonna be like, dude, he's gonna be like, listen, I think he's attached to Milo Yiannopoulos. Am I? No, just kidding, dude. I would be 2 feet within that queer, dude. Forgive me, that person of other status. And the other one would just be the America importing the OnlyFans talent. Like that to me was just like, it just blew me away. Will Trump endorse him? I think Trump already did endorse Vivek. And if he hasn't, he definitely will. And the reason why I say that too is because there was somebody who came from the campaign talking about the reason why Trump endorsed the New Jersey candidate and why he didn't endorse Winsome Earl Sears in the Virginia race. So again, I'll bring it up for the bajillionth time. You guys remember, attached. You guys remember the Jay Jones kind of scandal. Now, Jay Jones was the guy who basically texted across the aisle to this other, Republican representative and was saying all these things about how he wants to make these other guys in the Congress, this other guy particularly, him and his wife, watch the children get hurt so they change their political ideals. It's a very aggressive text exchange. It was happening around the same time the Young Republicans group chats were leaking, and people are like, oh, who's worse? Well, not Jay Jones, but Abigail Spanberger, who was running as governor of Virginia, she was up against Winsome Earl Sears. Winsome Earl Sears was also a black person, or a black woman, I should say. I had read, and I think it was from Politico, that Trump won't endorse candidates if they have more than like a small percentage gap in the race. And so the New Jersey guy was only down a couple percentage points. It was like 3.5 or 4.5. Winsome Earl Sears was down like at 7, 8, 9. And so because she was much further away from seemingly beating Abigail Spanberger, Trump never gave Winsome the endorsement. However, when you look at, so pre-Casey entering the race, when Vivek was sending out the emails, it was Amy Acton had 47% and Vivek was at 46%, which is very close and much closer than what happened in New Jersey and much closer than what happened in Virginia. And so if that maintains, which I doubt it will, because Casey entering the race has been a huge, huge change. But we got to see some more actual legitimate polling data, not just poly market odds. I would suspect that if the initial poll comes out that Casey has done a huge amount of damage to Vivek, maybe we don't get the endorsement from Trump. However, I think despite all what I just said, I do think just because of the relationship there has been developed with Vivek and MAGA and Trump, that he may get it anyways. So I think the jury might be a little bit out on that. I think it will highly depend on what Casey's numbers look like and what the overall race will be. So we'll see what happens with that when that comes out. And then, I wanted to explain a bit of this, the Beardson and Dumernet debate, but a bit more like in full length. And this will be the last thing I end on. I won't take too long. I won't take too much more of your guys' time. Beardson was pro and Dumernet was against the operation in Venezuela. And Beardson was essentially saying, what I had said on the onset yesterday, which is that the benefits that coincide and overlap with Israel's and the benefits that would down trickle to the American people, while they also may heavily overlap between America and Israel, it's like there's still a question of like, should that be what's being used as like the metric, as like the heuristic, right? Now, Dumanat on the other side, he's the one who brought up all the Argentinian stuff and the Isaac Accords and the Genesis Prize and how Javier Milei is already clearly a Zionist installment into Argentina and are bailing out of Argentina with these kind of, these money bonds in addition to just like handing them $20 billion is also further signs of our interest in maintaining that kind of installment there in Argentina. And then Beardson responds back in the pragmatic sense, and he makes the argument, again, pushing to this kind of like, what should be the metric? What should be the heuristic here? Dumanat, once again, bringing up what I think was probably maybe the best point that he had made in that initial bit was Maduro had already kind of offered the minerals, the oil. He opened it up. And I think the reason why we had said no was because he wanted there still to be a transfer of power and to maintain control over the military. And in a certain level, I think you would need to explore that at a better geopolitical sense. Somebody who's got a bit stronger grasp over like the military and the strategy there of like why that would not be a good or bad decision. But even Timothy Gordon also brought that up, not in the sense of like they should have taken the deal, but in general, like they both believed, a lot of people in the dissident right do believe that we still could procure the resources, but we could have done it through trade, not through the kind of, 2-hour extraction plan that took a few months to plan, that everybody kind of like just wasn't even ready to wake up to in the morning. So again, and I think that's a good one to listen to. They did get into a bit of the marching to the institutions or infiltrating the institutions between, Nick and like Arval. Dumanat posed a third option, which is kind of a bit of between both of those. And I think he thinks he's a pretty solid guy. I don't know too much about Dumanat, just that I know that he has largely followed. I followed him from the Jubilee moment that got him popular, and he seems like a pretty intelligent kid. So it probably would be worth the follow, to be honest with you. And obviously, same with Beardson. Beardson's definitely worth the follow. I like Beardson a lot. So and again, I think the bigger point being made is that kind of difference between like the millennials that exist, the zillennials too, that exist in the kind of Groyper movement, the ones that are a bit older and holding the optimism versus the younger ones who are a lot more black-pilled, given that they've been growing up in an exponentially more degenerate environment. And with that, that's essentially it. I did want to cover the OnlyFans stuff, but I'm actually going to convert that into a video, so I'm going to hang on with that. And I got to make sure I can get ready to be a part of this meeting and get that coordinated for NAV. And obviously with NAV, we are going to be looking forward to, ultimately having an impact in Ohio, but ultimately, still building that. I should have showed it at the beginning of the show, and I don't even have any of the links up here too. So that's a rookie mistake, if you will. But New American Vision, at NAV_creators, go and find us there. There's going to be a collection of myself, and me, Zeb Boykin, Josh Vandernoord, John Ward, Kino Flex, and a couple other individuals as well on the back end. I don't know if they want me to be name them or not, but we do have a lot of people on the back end who are helping. People are helping with the website. People are helping with just general promotion, marketing, etc. All the stuff that goes on there. It's a 6-wheeled beast. And so, with that, there's essentially everything I wanted to make sure we could drop off here. Everything should be coming back to normal this week, so you should be getting the Founder Show should be making a return. The Founder Show will probably be on a different day, but if it happens this weekend, it'll probably be the last Sunday it happens on, and we'll be moving to a different day. Groyper Report will also be coming back. And as always, guys, Christ is King. Was always King, is always King, and always will be King. I appreciate you guys greatly. And, firstly, always make sure you're pursuing the kingdom of God. In addition to that, though, seek first kingdom of God. That's lost the wording there. But again, deport Kash Patel, fire him, put him in jail, throw him into India, launch him from a cannon, don't care. Fire Pam Bondi, deport Pam Bondi, and deport all women over 200 pounds. That we don't need more cattle here. Global beef supply needs some help. That's kind of rude, actually, but no. The point stands. We need to get women out of the politics and public arena. It's not helping anybody. And with that, you guys have a good rest of your night. I should be seeing you all tomorrow, both in video and in stream format. So I will see you all then. Take care and have a good night. Peace.
Get up and get out. Get out.
Get out.
I have a question for you.
Say Christ is Lord. Say Christ is Lord. Say it. You say Christ is Lord. Get out. Get out. Christ